Welcome to this special edition to Invitation of Sisterhood. As you know, this is not our traditional type of show. We're not in studio. We're all in our own home studios here on a Zoom call. So thanks for joining us. And joining me are my regular co-host, Adora Ibrahim, who's with the Archdiocese of Detroit now, and Patrice Abona, who's the executive director of the Eastern Catholic Evangelization Center, which produces this show. And joining us as our guest is the author of this wonderful new book, and I don't even know what I did with it. Here it is, Teresa Tomeo. She's a Catholic broadcaster on Ave Maria Radio, Catholic Connection. She is an award-winning author, a speaker, and a wonderful writer. And she has written this new book, Conquering Coronavirus, and it's available now. And it's all about how faith can put your fears to rest. Teresa, thanks for joining us.
Hi, ladies. Hi, girls.
Hi.
How bellas?
Yeah. So T, you first got to tell our viewers and my co-host here how you churned this out in 3 days.
That's amazing.
It was all the Holy Spirit. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I've written almost, with this book now, it's probably about 15 books, and usually it takes a few months to crank out a book. But this one just poured out of me during Lent and after my mom passed away, not from COVID, but during the pandemic in March, on the feast of actually St. Joseph, of course, the saint of happy deaths, which was a blessing that she died on that feast day. But there was so much that I was experiencing and so much that I was learning through this process about how the church was reaching out to people. And I just thought, I don't want people to forget what we're experiencing, and I don't want us to miss an opportunity to come closer, to grow as families, to grow as friends, and most importantly, brothers and sisters in Christ. So I just started writing. I thought at first I was just going to do a booklet and put in a lot of resources for people, because during the show and some of the research I was doing, I was coming across really good resources and websites and stories, encouraging stories. And I said, well, I'll just do a little booklet and see if my publisher can crank that out. But I just kept writing and writing. And so I finally called up the president of Sophia Press, Charlie, and said, I don't know if it's possible, but I think I've got a manuscript for you. If you guys can turn this around, I can probably have it to you by Monday. And this was like on a Wednesday. And they said, if you can get it to us, we'll find a printer. And the team at Sophia was amazing, along with my team at Teresa Tomeo Communications. Vanessa, you're a part of that. But all the help I received in terms of helping me pull together the resource chapter and then the constructive criticism with the chapter titles, it just came out of me. I've never done anything that quickly in my life. And I truly believe it was the Holy Spirit wanting to get resources into people's hands.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you offered a lot of resources, T, in this, in terms of what you have in the back of the book to help people who are going to be suffering in a lot of different ways because of this crisis.
Yeah, we actually separated it into several different categories, starting with those who are suffering from COVID. And then we had family members of COVID victims. Then we had the elderly, and we had first responders, the military, military hospital, and then the law enforcement. Then we have people in the church, the laity and the leaders. And then we also had just a general resource list for folks, just people who are struggling with the whole situation and trying to figure it out. So that chapter is a very detailed chapter, the last chapter of the book. It has secular resources and pretty practical stuff. Another part of that I forgot to mention was those who've lost their jobs through this. That's a really big deal. Yeah. And so I tried to provide a lot of just very basic resources, such as the Small Business Administration, or how to file for unemployment if you've never done it before, pointing them to different government resources as well as faith-based resources, because we have to be practical. People are going to need some income, and when you've lost a job, and I know because I've been there, it can be very overwhelming trying to, where do I go, what do I do, how do I make sure they at least have some income coming in, how do I get myself registered for this opportunity or that. So I tried to be practical and spiritual with really great resources, and it's a really detailed chapter, that last chapter.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. I think we're going to continue to see more and more need out there as everything unfolds, even as people get back to work, and even as people, try to see whatever their new normal looks like. I just think the toll on mental health and even spiritual, a lot of people are despairing right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because I did a webinar last week for our Sunday Visitor, Ask the Catholic Medical Experts, and I had two very prominent doctors on with me. And they both said the same thing you just said, Adora, that they believe that because of the continued isolation, because of mental health, addictions, the elderly, all these different things, unemployment, that the cure, or let's say what's happening right now, is going to be worse than actually trying to find a cure. So all the fallout from it is going to be worse than the actual illness itself. And I think we have to help people understand that at some point, and we have to be very careful about this and do this slowly and safely, but at some point, life has got to go on. And my point of this book is, okay, right now, and as you said, probably, I would say at least probably for the rest of this year, this is going to be a top issue in our lives. But what happens when the next coronavirus or pandemic or something comes along? So the book looks at the current situation and many of the problems. At the same time, a lot of the resources that I give can be applied to any other situation in our life. You're trying to figure out, what does God want me to do? What is he calling on me to do? Have I put my priorities in the correct order? So it's a book for now, but I think it's also evergreen. That's how I tried to write it.
Yeah, and that's something. So we had a Zoom call. Everything's a Zoom call these days, right?
Right.
We had a Zoom call with my prayer group a couple of days ago, and we were talking as women about this pressure, because this is what women are good at doing, of, am I going to come out of the pandemic having accomplished enough? Did I discern enough what God wants to do with me? Did I organize my house enough? Did I take care of my kids enough? But all these things, it's almost like you want, and then also for me personally, with the spiritual aspect of it, I do want to make sure I'm trusting enough in the Lord and then doing enough. You don't want to just be sitting on a couch watching TV all day. How are you being productive, and how are you really discerning what God wants to do with this time in your life?
Yeah, I think that the first thing we need to do is rest in the Lord, and for busy people, especially women, because most of us are type A personalities, and especially if you're Italian or Chaldean, it just kind of comes with the blood, with like the same one to say, right? Because we're always doing something, especially in the kitchen, we're always cooking and taking care of people. It's just our nature, literally our nature, that blood of ours. We're just such caring people. But just what I would advise in the book is just rest in the Lord. And even I just wrote an article regarding the whole financial situation. I wrote it from a more secular perspective because Vanessa, who's helping me get the word out about the book, is going to be trying to place some articles for me. I think if people, let's say if you're out of work and you're laid off temporarily or God forbid permanently, I tell people, don't rush into trying to find a job. Take it easy, take a breath, and just try to think about it. And if you're a Christian, obviously pray about it and say, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? St. Teresa of Avila said, I am yours, I was made for you. What do you want me to do? I think the best thing is just to rest. We're not good at resting, and not just women. Society going along so quickly. And I think this is one of the reasons that God is allowing this to happen. So we do rest. Just give ourselves a break from the stress and the pressure. Get outside, take a walk, look at nature. Now that in Michigan, the weather's a lot nicer. Just rest. I heard an acronym when Deacon Dom and I were in diaconate formation in the Archdiocese of Detroit. One of the fellow diaconate wives said, the word busy can be seen as an acronym, being under Satan's yoke. Wow. Now, that doesn't mean that, working and doing things is bad, but we can all get caught up in doing just too much stuff, even if we're doing it so-called, for the Lord or for ministry. So
that was,
rest in the Lord,
Yeah, I wrote a blog early on, maybe a couple of weeks ago, right after Easter. And that was one of the things I said, is I think that the biggest pandemic of our time is actually this disease of busyness.
Right.
Everybody rushing their kids to activities, or keeping the, single people and parents and whatever, everyone's just so busy. And this is a time where we're all on this grand pause and we're called. So I like that angle you're saying of rest in the Lord. I think that's good to kind of just stop. And I was actually telling my husband that I was like, I'm excited to see what comes of this. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, because I read this article about back in the 2008 recession, the amazing companies that came out of that time. So like Uber and some of the bigger companies, because people are forced to innovate. I go, what if there's this guy who's in a job he hates and he just got laid off? He's going to sit and be like, well, look, God just gave me this opportunity to now pursue this dream or this passion, or to now I have to innovate because I have to, survive. And then these amazing things can come from it.
Yeah.
So, that's what actually happened to me, and it happened to Phoebe. Go ahead, tell your story.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that in my journey into what I'm doing now, was prompted by a firing or a layoff. You know, they didn't renew my contract at one of the big stations where I worked, and I was devastated at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, what am I going to do? But then I had to really look in the mirror and kind of figure out, you know, I really don't like the news business anymore, but it's all I knew how to do. And so I'm thinking, well, what else am I going to do? But that prompted me in that time off to develop my company, Teresa Tomeo Communications, and I do media relations, public relations, and it's like my umbrella company for everything, even my radio show and my books. But that forced me to be creative and say, well, I do have this media background. And when you've been a reporter, you know how to put a story on the air, you know how to write, you know how to speak, you know how to present. And so I was able to really think it through, and God showed me all the other things that he had equipped me for. And then he showed me that, oh, gee, it wasn't about me. It was supposed to be used for his glory. Who knew? Go figure.
He knew.
So, you know, that prompted me really to start. And I didn't even know at that time Catholic radio existed. It was just starting up. And then out of the blue, Al Cresta called me. We had become friends through a Christian media group. And this was all because I had lost a job. So this is why I tell people it's very painful, and our pride is involved, certainly because, and not pride in a bad way, but we take pride in our work and our vocations. And the fear sets in, but fear is another acronym, that word, false evidence appearing real. Mm-hmm. So we get caught up in that, and then we forget that maybe maybe this is actually an opportunity, or a blessing in disguise, or a silver lining, all those cliches that go along with it.
Mm-hmm. You know, Patrice said something the other day, when you put, and it makes me think of your book, Teresa, about faith, overcoming our fears. Patrice, you said the other day about how people are surprised to see Christians so joyful during this time, and something along those lines. And this is the first time in my life that I faced something where I could lose my clients again. I've already been, my contracts have been put on hold, and less income. My husband has half the income coming in because of the crisis. And I'm just like, okay, well, whatever. This too shall pass. And I have no idea when it'll pass, when it'll get better. But I'm so much calmer than I was in other crises in my life. And I know it's because where I am with my faith today than where I was 10 years ago. You know, when I left the county all crazed, you know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And it all fell into place. And I think, Patrice, your point is well taken. When your faith, and going to Teresa's book, when faith is your focal point, it diffuses the fear because God is there, right? So Teresa, that's the whole point of you writing the book.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even for Christians, it can be a challenge, especially if you have children and you have a family to raise.
Yeah.
And we can all get caught up in that. Well, gosh. And then of course the media pounding it 24/7 that the world is ending, the sky is falling, and we're all going to die, which is basically what they said when this thing started. And in some ways, they're still saying that. It could be very scary and disheartening, but we have to take a breath and say, Jesus, I trust in you. I mean, he really is in charge. And this is reminding us that we are not in charge. I mean, we think we are in so much control of our lives, and we're not. You know, it doesn't mean we throw caution to the wind and don't worry about anything, or plan or take care of ourselves. But at the end of the day, you know, we're not in charge. We're not running things. God is the one who's in charge, not us.
You know, this interesting thing I read the other day was talking about pride, and how people who, when we try to be in control, it's actually a sin of pride. Mm-hmm. And I really heard it that way. I'm like, I like things to be in control, and I never considered myself a prideful person. But when we try to be in control, it is pride. It's saying, I can control this better than you, God. I can keep my family safe, and I can protect this person, and I can do this, and it's all pride. But when you just let it go, when you trust God, I mean, in a smart way, I'm not saying we're all caution to the wind, but being cautious, but also trusting in God's will.
What I think is really neat, what's happening is the devil loves to scare people with fear. He loves to give you the worst thoughts and think that, mm-hmm. The world is ending and that you're not going to come out of this. And yet, even if people aren't faithful, I see all over the world, and I put this in the book is full of hope. I really wanted it to be hopeful. These beautiful stories of priests and others, and even average lay people reaching out and doing things that they never thought they would be doing, in terms of starting their own little, you were mentioning, starting and doing things a little bit differently, maybe a new venue. Many people are starting their own little ministries in terms of organizing and helping other families, and helping restaurant workers who are laid off. Or over in Italy, you know, my motherland, where people are going out on their balconies and doing these impromptu concerts. I talk about the one opera singer, he lives in Florence, and he went out for a week in the middle of March and gave an impromptu concert on his balcony. And the video of that went viral. I mean, so there's all these beautiful things that are happening. I really see a lot of goodness out there, as well as I know there's still fear, but the human spirit and the natural law that's written on our hearts, I think people are really acting on that right now. And I put tons of stories in the book. So it's really an uplifting book that'll calm people down and say, hey, you know what? There's a lot of good going on right now too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think when we focus on the hope
my
that
dog
we
out of my room.
Christ. Go ahead, Vanessa. I think when we focus on the hope that we have and hang our hat on all the goodness that we see, you know, that in of itself, you know, is Jesus. And it gives us a peace that really does surpass all understanding, because, you know, the world is it's a scary time for everybody right now. And this is the one time in the world where we're all facing the same exact thing. And it doesn't matter who you are, what country you live in, what your background is. You know, I think one thing that people realize is our mortality. We're not guaranteed tomorrow.
Right.
And I think, you know, what I'm praying for is that a lot of people in this time are going to realize that we really don't have any control over our lives, like you said, Patrice, and the fact that we just really have to place our hope in Jesus and the things that he can do for us that the world can't, that the government can't, that we can't. Of course, you know, we're asked to do whatever we can, you know, in our own lives to help all those that are in need. And I see that. And I really do think the triumph of the human spirit is going to continue to unfold, you know, as we take care of one another. But when we focus on him versus, you know, the fear, it just makes all that difference for everybody around us, you know, our families, our children, everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
talked about the stories. You guys, she included a story in there about Father Brian Casa. Can you talk about that, Teresa?
Yeah, that was a great story about the Eucharistic adoration in the parking lot, and also that adorable sign that said, if you need confession, flash your lights and I'll come over. You know, when he put the monstrance in the window, and then he came out with it and did the blessing, and he wasn't expecting that many people. He was just expecting, oh, maybe there'll be, 10, 20 cars. I mean, the image that went viral of the parking lot with row after row after row of cars, it was like, whoa. And to me, that was just such a warm and fuzzy, and it was a rainy night. It was not a pretty night weather-wise, and people came out, and it made him feel so good. Then the priest in Lansing, Father Mark Rutherford, who's also in the book, he took to the skies. He was one of the first ones to do Eucharistic procession in the air, hired a pilot, and they took Bishop Boyer in Lansing found out about he was doing this, and he said, this is awesome, let's record it. And they sent the diocesan videographer in the plane with them, and they shot the whole thing, and he went all over the Diocese of Lansing, and that went viral. So those kinds of stories, as well as one of my favorites over in Italy, in Milan, a little town outside of Milano that was obviously one of the big epicenters in the beginning. This adorable priest missed his people so much, and he said, please send me your pictures. And so he prints the pictures up. He posts them all over the pew, so when he's celebrating Mass, he can see their lovely faces. So stories like that are very heartwarming, and the book is full of hope, and I think the triumph, as you said, Adora, of the human spirit.
I think, yeah, early on, I found this solidarity in it because we, as Chaldeans, we have brothers and sisters around the world that have been persecuted for their faith, and some in some countries that don't receive the Eucharist for sometimes years. They don't have access to the Mass. They don't have access to a church. And we have multiple Masses per day, adoration all the time, confession at our fingertips, and we take it all for granted. And we might go to confession every few months. We might go to adoration when we find some time or when it's convenient. And now it's been taken away from us. Now there's this hunger. So God's almost like challenging us, like, now when I give it back to you, what are you going to do? Are you still just going to go back to whenever it's convenient for you, or are you really hungry for it now? You're going to, take advantage of it. And I do find a lot of solidarity with our brothers and sisters around the world that live like this for years and years and years, never having this access to the Eucharist.
I was doing an interview the other day with Dr. Matthew Bunson and Brian Patrick from EWTN for their radio program, The Church Alive, and Dr. Bunson is like this wonderful Catholic history professor. And he said there are parts of the world, for example, in Japan, where certain Catholics there in a particular region, I forget exactly what area, were not able to receive for not just years, but in some cases there wasn't a priest around for hundreds of years. I mean, it was just there was just this dryness in terms of Catholicism. And so my mom, Rosie Posey, used to always say in her Jersey accent, offer it up to the Lord and put it at the foot of the cross. So that's what I'm telling people to do. Let's identify. Let's really offer this up. I mean, I know that I know I'm spoiled. And I'm speaking for myself because my parish is right down the street. I'm so used to just going there anytime I want, whether it's for adoration or my spiritual director's there. And again, as you said, Patrice, we've been so blessed with so much abundance. And why can't we align that suffering, and put it at the foot of the cross? And St. Catherine of Siena says this: leave that there and give it over to God. But then think about the people, the Chaldean brothers and sisters, or the people in Japan, or the people in the Amazon, or those who are a lot worse off in other countries right now, haven't been able to have access, or been really persecuted for their faith in terms of blood martyrs as opposed to white martyrdom. And we have a lot of that here in this country. But let's really offer that up. And then I think, as you said, it is already, I think, developing a deeper appreciation for the Eucharist.
Yeah, a hunger, because that picture you said about with the Chaldeans at Father Brian's church, that was early on. They've been doing Sunday adoration, and it's been packed. Bishop Francis shut it down at St. Thomas a couple of weeks ago because traffic was backed up for a mile in each direction.
Wow.
And he came and he said, all right, you drive through, you come in, you get your blessing, and you leave. And it was beautiful. It was a little sad that they didn't get to stay, but it was beautiful to see this hunger. Everybody is just, they've been deprived for over a month now. We had to go through Holy Week and Easter Sunday and not go to church. And so
it's amazing that this happened during the holiest time of the year for us as Christians. It speaks volumes that we could not go to the holiest mass of the year because of this pandemic. It's amazing what's happening. And T, you've interviewed so many people from our church, priest Father Ricardo, on this issue, and in terms of fear and faith, and what are we supposed to be discerning from this, and what is God telling us? Can you share some of that insight with us? And in terms of people who get so confused, God's punishing us because of sin, and you've talked to so many people on your Catholic Connection show. Speak to us about that.
I've talked to a lot of different priests and faith-based leaders who are very knowledgeable in the faith, and Father John Ricardo, I think, is just so solid. He's so well educated in the faith, but he's also so real. He's very down to earth. And early on, I had him on the program, and he also did a beautiful video that was sent to those who joined us on our first Good News Marriage Cruise back in January, kind of reminding folks, to build on what we learned in that cruise. But in the video and also on my radio show, he said that he reminded us that the word corona means crown, and in Latin or Italian. And he said, what are the crowns that we've given, royalty or the top spots in our lives? And he truly believes that God didn't cause this. We live in a fallen world. This is something that has happened. God has allowed it to happen in his ultimate wisdom, his omnipotence. But that what are the crowns that we've been giving priority to? And he said, in some cases, it can be, too much television, too much liquor, too much whatever. He said, those crowns need to be removed, and we need to look at the crown of thorns and the crown of Christ. So we concentrated on the word corona and the word crown. And I think it's very telling that Saint Corona is from northern Italy, in a little town outside of the very region where all of this began, which was Bergamo, Brescia, and then a little bit further west to Milano. And so God is sending us, I think, all kinds of reminders, and he's speaking to us so loudly and clearly that I am here. We just celebrated Divine Mercy Sunday, Jesus, I trust in you. He's all over this. People just need to really slow down and to look and to say, okay, God, I need to see you right now. So that's why I included so many of those insights and stories in the book, because I want people to remember that God is with us, even through the times that seem so very dark and hopeless.
What are you, maybe we all can share, if it's doesn't get too personal, of what we've discerned from this process, our own stay home order, and what we've learned, and what Teresa, I asked you the other day, what did you learn from even writing this book? How did it change you? I mean, maybe we could do a little round robin of how this has affected us individually and in our faith.
Who wants to start? Should I start?
Yeah, go ahead. Talk about the journey of the book too.
Well, I think for me, it was just a reminder and a real encouragement of how God is with us in all the times, because I was really having my Italian Jersey moments the day my mom was buried. And that was a really tough day. It was ugly, it was rainy, and it wasn't the day that I had planned. We had planned to bury her on March 25th, which was my father's birthday and the Feast of the Annunciation. And I thought, what a beautiful gift from my dad to send my mom off on his birthday. And it didn't happen. Things had to change. We had to have the committal. It was supposed to be a funeral mass that got canceled, and then we had to move it to Saturday, and it was only a committal service because at that point, they had stopped everything in terms of any type of masses. And I got up that morning and I was just so angry. I was so frustrated because we had such a beautiful send off for my dad, and it didn't happen for my mom. And yet the Lord showed his face through two friends of mine who reminded me that day that my mother was actually being buried on my patron saint and my favorite saint's birthday. And I had been grumbling and whining, you want some cheese with that wine so much that I didn't even take the time to stop and listen to the messages my friends were trying to send me to remind me that I wasn't alone. First of all, that they were thinking and praying for me, but secondly, like, hey, this is St. Teresa's birthday. You can't, this is pretty significant for you. So for me, again, it just reminded me that God is with us. He's all over it. It was just an affirmation for me. And I just felt so strongly that I had to use the platform I have, the responsibility I have to get that message out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amen. How about you, Adora?
Honestly, this just reminds me that, you make plans in life and you hope that things are going to turn out a certain way, whether it's when you're first getting married or when you have your first child or you open your new business or whatever the case may be. But it's just a reminder to me that, you can plan your heart out, but sometimes most of the times, they don't turn out the way that you plan. And, there's been times of trauma in my life where I knew without a doubt that I just had to put all of my trust in God and just, thank him for being who he is and just continuing to, pour out his graces over us in the midst of crisis and trauma. Mm-hmm. And really what this did for me is it did help me focus on the things that were taking my time away from him. Not that we don't go to mass every Sunday or pray every day, but honestly, I found myself repenting a lot of things that I was thinking or blanket thoughts over, certain things. And I just kept saying, I'm sorry, Lord. I'm sorry, Lord. And what it brought into focus for me was that he wants all of our hearts back. And so I was like, all right, Lord, I have to be all in 100%. I mean, you can't be, this part of your life, can't be, here compartmentalized. It has to be all focused on him. It does. And then everything will just, float from there.
Beautiful. Patrice, how about you?
I think what I found early on that I loved was the purity of the time, because it wasn't muddled with rushing anywhere, having to do anything. I was able to just be home with my family. We cooked, we cleaned, we just went for walks. And it was just such a simplicity about life and learning to value that. And then I think later on it came when I didn't realize how at peace I was until I saw sometimes how others weren't in so much peace. They were really struggling. And I was really grateful for what I do have. I think there's times when you can take for granted, your husband or your kids or your home, and take for granted, both my husband and I didn't have to, thank God neither of our jobs were affected. And then personally, sometimes I can even strive for, I wish I had a job that was more like this, more like that. The job I have now at ECRC allowed me to have that time with my family and allowed me to continue to evangelize in these more creative ways, but to use my energy for the Lord. So there's just a lot of clarity. And I don't think I'm quite there yet. I do still have those days where I text my sister, it's a very yelly day. My kids are just my nerves today. It's not a good day. I'll definitely have those days, or days where I'm like, babe, I'm going for a walk, figure it out. And I'll just leave for a half hour. But overall, I am enjoying just kind of being at home.
Mm. Yeah, the time home. I have to say I have a lot on my plate all the time, and it's been nice to be hanging out with Elena, and just playing board games and cards and coloring. We've done a lot of art projects, and I don't really get to do that, and I've loved that. But one of the things that this has shown me is really trusting in God. I have the Divine Mercy picture of Jesus, I trust in you, in my kitchen, and I walk by it every 20 times a day, and it's just so important. And I was getting so frustrated. I actually this was probably a pivotal moment for me. I called Teresa on a Sunday night, just really at my wit's end. And I was just like, I can't take it. I can't take the craziness in this world. I can't take the commentary on Facebook. I can't take our being beholden to elected leaders I don't trust. And I'm not going to get into politics, but I just was having a moment. And so I called her and I just vented, and we were on the phone for an hour, and I was like, really like trying to hold back tears, and I can't take these people. So we talked, and I prayed that night. I got up the next morning, I prayed again, and I walked past my office, and I see this beautiful shadow of a cross in my window. And I thought, okay, God. And I really felt he was hugging me and like patting me on the back saying, it's okay. I'm here. I got it. And I sent the picture to Teresa, and she's like, oh my gosh, she's giving you a big hug. And it was like that reminder that, okay, you know what? These elected leaders are not in control. They're doing some damage, but at the end of the day, God is there, and whatever's going to happen is the will of God. And that gave me such peace and solace. And it was just like that reminder that even in the midst of crazy crisis and something I can't control, God has got it. God's got it.
You've got to put that image out there, because it's like, it's huge. I mean, it was so prominent. There's like no doubt it was like the Lord saying, Facebook. Hello. Remember?
Yeah. You know, I put it on Facebook, and I really hesitated, and I thought, I'm going to put it on Facebook. I could not, but I had probably 230 likes and so many comments, because I think people need that reminder too. And it was such a prominent, and I don't know if Adora and Patrice saw it on my Facebook, but it was so prominent in my window that it was like he hit me over the head. It was like, hello,
And you probably, that shadow has probably been in that same place every day since you've been in that house. But you just noticed it that day, right? You know what I mean? And sometimes it's like,
I've never seen that shadow. The next morning, I never saw it again. I've never seen it. No, ever. The next day I walked in and I said, and I went in the office at the same time, and I'm like, am I going to see that shadow again? I've not seen it since then. I've never seen it before. It was such
a God wink, Vanessa.
Yeah.
It's a God wink.
Yeah.
But also I think a couple of you mentioned, I think that's a point too, is about having that network of friends. I think we need that. Like, I call my sister, or I call my mom, or I have a couple of friends, or even like these prayer groups or different things. We need that too. And that's, I think, the thing I'm personally missing the most is the community. I'm loving the time at home with my husband and my kids, but I am missing that like extended community time. And I think it's important to keep those connections going, because we all need that.
Absolutely. And reaching out to people too, sometimes throughout this time where I've had, a couple extra hours, reaching out to the elderly or aunts or somebody you might not know, typically be on your call list, just to see how they're doing. And, when I've done that, some of the people on the other end literally start to cry. They're like, I can't believe you're calling me. Because right now what's going on is that, it's not only fear, it's that isolation, that real, the being alone, and also just, feeling like there's nobody there, and I think when we reach out, when we just, pick up the phone or check on a neighbor or whatever the case may be, that's just, another way that it helps me get out of the funk that I might be feeling, or the sadness or whatever. I'm like, let me see how so-and-so is doing, or let me check on this, or let me drop food off to this guy, or,
On that note, I want to make note, Adora's company, her family's restaurant, packed lunches, Princess and Commerce packed lunches for the first responders. So here's
the name of it.
Business. It's Princess. You go ahead, Adora.
Princess Mediterranean Grill in Commerce Township, and we've been doing this every single week. Hundreds of meals, whether it's Huron Valley Hospital or Henry Ford. Next week it'll be Ascension. It's just a small way for us to be able to give back, because sometimes when you feel like when you have no control over the situation and you can't help, you do feel helpless. But we can all do things, to help in our own way, even if it seems so small as a phone call or sending a meal off. You guys, one of the times when I delivered the meal, I can't even tell you, I can't get 2 words out without me starting to cry. I just want to tell them thank you, and like, as the word thank you is coming out, it's not even enough. My goddaughter is like a frontliner. She's, a CRNA, a nurse anesthesiologist. My godson works in the hospital. I have cousins who are all in these, literal frontline jobs. I have another cousin in the ER, and it's like, I think about them, I pray for them, and I'm like, Lord, what can I do to just ease their burden a teeny tiny bit? And you know what I'm telling you guys what I'm concerned about too, just so we can continue to pray, is not only will there be, you know, all these mental health issues, but think about the frontline people. They're going to have all this PTSD stuff going on. And, you know, for us to just send a meal or pick up the phone, wow, I just, you know, it's the least that we could.
Yeah. T,
My
you
husband's
had a
kind of
great
like
guest on. You had a great guest on, T, of a, I'm sorry, Patrice, that was talking about reaching out to priests, you know, and our Chaldean priests, I think, are very fortunate. They have big families and a lot of people in the community, but not all priests have that. And so I thought of, you know, right away, after I heard your interview, I sent a meal to Monsignor and Father Craig at St. Fabian. And then I texted my spiritual advisor, Father Alex, the other day, and I said, hey, are you okay? You know, sweet to the point, how are you? Do you need anything? And he texted me right back. He goes, if you're asking if I need food, no, you know, like your mom, every Chaldean is called. So, but those little things, you know, it's so important to just reach out. Great point, Adora, to reach out. You talked about that, Teresa, so much on your show.
Yeah, we had a woman from Texas, and it's a ministry. She started this ministry called Vocation, I think it's vocationministry.com, just to support people who were men who were in either formation for priesthood or already a priest. And she said, you know what, there's got to be something we can do. And so she came up with just a list of suggestions and ideas for people on how they can support the priests. And one of them was the meals, and they were loving that. But the other thing she did is that they're giving people idea to do the parades, you know, the drive-by parades.
Yeah.
And there have been a couple of them that have done like some really big ones with like a little small, like musical quartet or something. So those beautiful stories, it makes such a difference. I can remember a friend of mine, a priest, I won't say his name, he's fine now in the Archdiocese of Detroit. He had COVID and he was in quarantine, and he was quarantining at his parents' house, not far from me in Grosse Pointe, and his parents were at another location. And he got there and he was all squared away. And I said, you know, we're in St. Clair Shores. We're like literally 3 blocks away from where we were staying. And I said, what do you need? And he writes it back. He goes, well, you know, he comes over a lot for dinner during the regular times. He goes, I wouldn't mind one of those great Italian meals that you make for us. And I'm like, okay, no problem. So I went over, I brought him Italian chicken soup. I brought him meatballs and rigatoni, a big bottle of red wine. And I came to the door, and of course he stood behind the door. He went, he couldn't stand it, you know, so it just made his day. And he wrote me back, and I gave him, like, I don't know, you know, like Chaldeans and Italians are the same way. You're not going to give enough for one meal. You're going to give enough for like 10 meals, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how many meatballs and how much sauce I gave him, but he had enough for at least 2 weeks. But it made him feel good. It made me feel good. And I kept calling him. He goes, I got enough food. Don't worry about it. But those kinds of things make all the difference. They really do.
Yeah, absolutely. I say if you can't physically hug or kiss them, which, you know, we're so accustomed to doing,
I know, right?
Then feed them.
Feed them. Isn't that funny? Because you try to tell this to people if they're not, I mean, you know, we're so much alike. When I went to V's wedding, I'm like, this is like my family. Like everybody, you know, I mean, I just felt so at home. Yeah. But it's always, and when the ECRC ladies come to, you know, Ave Maria for the membership drive, that's like the best day of the week because they're so fun and the food is like so fantastic. But we're such physical people. Yeah, that's another thing that's really hard. I mean, it's like the social distancing thing. I mean, Italians, I'm sure, like Chaldeans, we have no idea what is personal space.
Exactly.
Personal space.
Exactly.
We're just the opposite. We're like, you know, kissing on both cheeks and hugging and squeezing. And so that's been a real sacrifice for me. It really has. And I miss my 2 grandnieces, Liana and Francesca, like crazy. And that's driving me nuts. They're only like a half hour away from us and I can't see them. So it's also given me, I think, a greater appreciation for the physical part of who we are as a people. And that's what's so great about being Catholic, is that it encompasses the spiritual and the physical. But the social distancing thing, I don't know. I think Chaldeans and Italians should get some sort of exception.
Yeah, we I actually had one of my...
Or a medal, right, yeah.
One of my husband's really good friends text us, and he's like, hey, I'm proposing to my girlfriend on Saturday. We're doing like a proposal party. And I was like, what? And he's doing it like in a parking lot. And so I was like, no one else has anything to do. I'm like, sure, let's go. So we went. There were at least 25, 30 cars.
Aww.
Like you know, the Zonatello, the drummer, of a pickup truck. He had a huge speaker. He played this music. We all stayed in our cars or just like popped our heads out. My daughter was like out of the sunroof, and him and his fiance with masks on, like walked down this parade of cars, and the music. And I was just crying for the
Aw.
10 minutes because I'm like, you don't realize how much you miss real life and how
Yeah.
you miss like being happy and joyful. And like my husband's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, it's just because and you're just so happy for them. And he said he got a lot of pushback in the beginning because everyone's like, why would you do it now? And I'm like, no, thank you for doing it now. We all need it. You need to feel normal.
That's so beautiful.
And I don't know, I was really happy. So
that is beautiful. And, and right, we do need some normalcy, and what a great way to express your love and have all those people there. T, how can we get the book?
It's really easy. You can just go to teresatomeo.com, just go to the book section. Very easy. Just go to my homepage. You'll see the list of different items on the website. Just says books. Just go to the bookstore. You can order it there. Ave Maria Radio has it on their website, as well as Sophia, or even Amazon. If you like the book, if you get it, it's in print now this week. Give us a nice review on Amazon. It always helps, but it's available on Amazon as well. But I like to send people to either my website, through Ave Maria or Ave Maria Radio, to give the radio station a little bit of a nice little boost there.
So T, one last thing before we let you go, and I don't know if Adora or Patrice have last questions, but what else do you want to share with us before we let you go?
Oh, I think this is a great book, not just for now, as I said earlier, but it's an evergreen book on how to deal with tough times, regardless of the situation. And even though it came out of me during this pandemic, I really wanted to really help us focus on how are we to become and stay really good Christians within not only in the Catholic Church, so this is really meant for anyone who has a faith in the Lord, and how can we stay close to Jesus in good times and in bad. And so it can be done as a family study, it can be done as a Bible study in a women's group, because each chapter has reflection questions at the end of it. And again, tons of resources and different media outlets, Catholic media outlets, where they can get great information and stay close to Christ. So I also wanted to let you know that we're going to be doing a teaching through St. Joan of Arc. We're going to have a series of live streaming events starting on May 13th. I'm going to be talking in my parish on the book, and each week we're going to be encouraging a book club. I'll have more on that on my website, and we'll be announcing all the details on Catholic Connection as well.
Great. Any last words, Adora?
I was just going to say, I'm so happy that, that you were able to get it together as quickly as you did, that, the Holy Spirit just kind of, blew through, and you were able to, churn this out, and it's out there for people, because this is really a time where, we have to reach out and help each other. And I think this is a wonderful resource for people to have, and just something to give them more hope. So
thank you.
I agree. And I think, sometimes we struggle too, as Catholics. Everyone looks at us like, well, of course you have faith, but then how do we as Catholics, or just as Christians in general, continue to evangelize? So us having this sort of resource as a guide for us to have now the tools to give to others that we might need is also amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, for joining us.
Thank you. It's so great to see you guys, at least at a distance. Well, okay, let's do the air kisses. Mwah, mwah.
And thanks for everyone watching this special edition to An Invitation to Sisterhood. Thanks for joining us. We pray we'll be back to a somewhat normal and have regular Sisterhood shows for you back in the studio. God bless. Have a wonderful time, and we'll see you next time.